this can come across as a really intimidating and inefficient camera. So before we get into some tips and tricks for making the most out of your M and your own efficiency, I want to make sure you fully understand how the M works. And if you aren't aware of how this camera operates or focuses, I've got a link right above that you can hit up, and it'll take you to a video where I really just lay out how the M operates, so you'll understand that, and then we can move forward on this video. But if you're ready for all that and you're ready for some tips and tricks, then let's dive in. Of course, before we do, if this is your first time here, I really hope you're watching this video from a place of peace in your life. My name is Dave, and I'm a photographer and filmmaker from the Bay Area of California. Now, I hope to educate and empower you with information on this channel, so be sure to subscribe if that resonates with you. And if you reach out or comment, I always try to reply because community comes first. So join this community and follow along. All right, let's jump into these tips, and I'm gonna break them into 3 categories. Category 1, tips for camera setup. In this first category, I'm gonna show you a few tips for just setting up your camera. The very first thing I did when I got my M was I made the shutter button more robust. The M shutter is pretty flat, and if you have larger hands or you just like a more robust experience with your camera, you can get a very inexpensive shutter button to add to your M with great ease. Now, this is quite different than most rounded plastic buttons on other cameras that you may be familiar with. Adding a shutter button like the one that I have, this is just a small wooden button from Amazon, and you can get these in plastic, you can get them in wood, you can get them in metal, and some of them even have like various designs. It's a pretty bottomless pit of options if you look around on Amazon or Etsy or even your local Leica store. But if you like mine, this wooden one, I did link it below. Now, if you're ever going to use the back screen for focusing, I would recommend setting up a custom button on your camera to punch that screen in very quickly. I set up this top button on the M11 to punch into whatever I'm focused on. This makes focusing quicker. There's my cat. This makes focusing quicker with less guessing as you try to focus peak. Sorry, I'm kind of laughing. I'm not gonna stop though, I'm just gonna keep going here. I'm not a huge fan of screen focusing, but sometimes it is necessary, and at those times, I typically will just punch in and check that focus. My third tip is inspired by the principle of starting with the end in mind. So when I'm out shooting and I have an intent to edit, I will go ahead and select my white balance. I don't shoot auto white balance. I'm gonna choose it so that whenever I get into my edits in post, all of my photos are gonna have the same white balance. It's not gonna be all over the place where I have to tweak it on every single photo. I typically set my white balance between 48 and 52K, so it rarely is gonna come off of that. I find that setting your white balance before you go out to shoot will just give you consistent colors across whatever you're shooting, and will just save you time in those edits in post. Okay, so now let's talk about category 2, tips for carrying your camera. My first tip in this category is to consider that you don't need a ton of gear. Let's all say that together. Maybe open up your phone to selfie mode and get that camera out and look yourself in the mirror and say, I do not need a ton of gear. One thing you should consider is trimming down your carry so that your options are limited. My favorite way to do this is to not carry a bag, or if I do need to carry a bag, like let's say I want to carry a lens and one other lens, then I carry the smallest bag possible, whether it's just like a fanny pack or a small sling, or at most one of these bags that are behind me here. Now, there are many ways to go about this, many combos within this philosophy, but the point is that you want to minimize your carry to force yourself to think more intentionally with just like 1, maybe 2 lenses. So trim that carry down and just go out that way. And the next tip is to not be deceived by adding bulk to your camera, because anything you add to this is going to come with a trade-off. The M is a very elegant camera. It's very minimal, it's very slim, it's very light compared to other systems. But one thing you may be tempted to do is to bulk it up a little bit. Now, this is especially true if, again, like me, you have larger hands. But that said, even the smallest change to the design can cause your experience to greatly change as well. For instance, I really prefer having a thumb grip on my M11. This one that I have is a third-party grip, I know, blasphemy. And I love the way that this grip makes my camera feel in my hands, and it definitely, for me, adds stability. But I will typically only use this thumb grip when my camera is riding in and out of the bag and I'm not carrying it on my body. And that's because the trade-off is that when I'm walking around, I feel that thumb grip stabbing me in my ribs all day long. So that's the trade-off. If it's coming in and out of my bag, no problem there. But if it's just on the strap, I typically won't use it because I can feel it stabbing me in the ribs all day. Now, when I had the Q2, I added the body grip and the thumb grip. This thing was a grip monster, but it made the camera really heavy and really bulky, and it wasn't really an EDC at that point. So just consider what your trade-offs are gonna be if you add anything to your M for your carry. Now, finally, I'm gonna say something super controversial regarding how you carry the camera. Are you ready? Consider ditching those camera clips. I get it. They are really convenient and they let you use your favorite strap across many of your cameras. So maybe it's just me, but I have this beautiful and elegant camera, so I put on its own split ring dedicated strap. Now, I do have my favorite strap that I've used for many years across many cameras. It was a gift, it has my initials on it. I love that strap and I use it with other cameras, but I just don't use it with the M. I've got a dedicated black split ring on this one, a dedicated brown split ring on the M11. The straps are aging as I use these cameras and they're just beautiful. I have them linked below. They're from Clever Supply. Check them out if you like them. And before we get into our final category of tips, let me just share two quick things with you. First, I just launched a brand new workshop, a fall workshop in Grand Teton, focusing on building a body of work. This is a storytelling workshop where you're gonna have a chance to experience some of the most beautiful places in the world, all while building a personal portfolio. To learn more about this workshop, hit the link below and check out all of the details. And if you have any questions, just hit me up. Next, I recently launched the Very Good Discord, a free hub to build community. This is a great place to connect with other photographers and discuss a range of topics, or join up on meetups, or just honestly just to build community with other photographers like yourself. Joining the chat is easy, it's free, just hit that link below and sign up. Okay, so our third and final category, tips for actually making photos with this thing. Because this is why you're here. This is the big one. The tips that can make you better and more efficient as a photographer. And I've got 4 of them for you. Each could honestly just be their own video, but I'm gonna just rapid fire through them as quick as I can so you can have all 4 in the next couple of minutes. Okay, first up, shoot in auto mode. You don't wanna be fiddling with the dials constantly all the time, trying to get your exposure right. Just shoot it in auto. There are 2 auto modes on your digital M. You can put it into auto shutter or auto ISO. Don't ever do both, do one or the other. And here is how I use auto shutter and auto ISO. Now, most of the time for me, I've got the shutter in automatic and I've got the ISO set as low as possible. And that's because I shoot in great light. I like to keep the ISO low, and my shutter readout is rarely below my personal minimum, which is 2 times the focal length. So if I'm shooting something like a 50, that means that as I'm looking at my shutter speed, I'm not gonna go below 1/100 in most cases. But I will use auto ISO when I need to consider motion or low light. Like if I wanna make sure that motion is really clear, I might set my shutter to 1/500 or higher, 1/1000 or whatever, and I'll choose auto ISO. For low light, I'll just set my shutter to 2 times the focal length. So again, if it's 50, I'll set the shutter to 1/100, and I'll put it in auto ISO because at the end of the day, a grainy photo is better than a blurry photo. Now the same principle can kind of apply to film, except you're using Sunny 16 as your auto mode. Just learn Sunny 16 and all it entails and you're gonna be fine. Now, I'm also gonna assume that you are the type of person that took the advice I said earlier and you go out with 1 or 2 lenses. And I think that one of the greatest things you can do when you're taking a composition, you're trying to determine if you've got the right lens on or not, is to simply just use the frame selector here. You know, you can check out what other lenses are going to look like without even taking this one off. On a digital M, probably more than any other camera that I've ever had, dust loves to get on the sensor. I try to change lenses as little as possible whenever I'm out on a shoot. So I use the frame lines to really tell me if it's worth the risk of getting dust on the sensor. And I use the little blower, but I still sometimes just get dust on the sensor. But I'll use the frame lines to tell me if it's worth the switch. And I can look here and see what other lenses are going to do and how they're going to compose. Next tip, learn your zones. Even if you're not a street photographer, zone focusing works and it's trustworthy. Now, I'm not gonna go into all the details of how to zone focus. I did it in this video. It's linked right above. You can check that out after you're done watching this one, but just learn your zones. Zone focusing allows you to shoot your M like it actually has autofocus, but you gotta get somewhat good at it, you know? You gotta practice and understand how far away something like 1 meter is, 2 meters, 3 meters, 1.2 meters. And the only way you're really just going to learn that is to practice. So just walk around your house and 1 meter, I think this is 1 meter, boom, check it. I think this is 2 meters, boom, check it. Just get really comfortable with those zones. And of course, you can always just set it to infinity and go out and shoot. But ultimately, learn your zones. Okay, so last here, these are a few focus tips. When you are using the Rangefinder patch, look for something with good contrast to focus on, even if it's not the composition you want. Find something on the same focal plane with clear edges or lines, or just anything that helps you really dial it in, and then bring your composition into place. You can also do this with your meter to get the lighting right. I talked about this in the Glacier video, but you can just half press the shutter on what you want to meter on and just fire it off after you move it around. It's super easy. So just make sure you're finding something that's clear for you to use that Rangefinder patch if you struggle with focus. Another tip is regarding nailing focus on a narrow plane, specifically with portraits. Now, I did a video back in the fall with my friend Wayne from the Leica store in San Francisco, and he shared about that 45-degree rule. So basically, if you are struggling to nail focus on a Summilux or a Noctilux or anything that just has a narrow focal plane, simply turn your camera to 45 degrees and then focus and then bring it back down. It's honestly amazing how much this works for nailing focus at 1.4 or lower if you're shooting a Noctilux. Now, when you are out and there's something going on that you can anticipate, like you're setting up for a scene with street photography, or maybe your kids are running around the yard and you know they're gonna keep passing you over and over and over, one thing you can do to make sure you nail focus is just simply pre-focus on a spot and then wait for your subject to come into that spot. I'll do this sometimes if I see something coming and I just wanna make sure that when it gets into the composition, into the frame, it's nailed in focus. I'll just pre-focus where it's going to be rather than trying to track it as it moves. Super easy way to make sure you get your shot. And the final focus tip I have for you is simply to learn your lens. Like, make sure you know what happens when you go left and when you go right. Make sure you learn about how far something is when, say, you're at 5 o'clock. Simply learning your lens is gonna give you some muscle memory to just snap that focus into something that's reasonably close when you're out shooting. That also means committing, because knowledge takes time. But like all things in life, you put in the hours and you will get the results. All right, guys, I hope that you found today's video helpful and you found these tips impactful for your own personal experiences shooting on the Leica M. Now, I'm always here if you have any questions, especially on the very good Discord server, so hit me up over there. And you can also leave your questions or comments right below, and I will do my best to reply to every single one of them. Again, community comes first. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next time.